Good morning, Sunnyvale. Just a moment before we get started. We'll just get started in just a moment. Okay. Good morning, Sunnyvale friends. Happy Christmas Eve to those that are celebrating. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week, this holiday week, for my weekly virtual office hour address. This is the 93rd installment of our weekly office hours, virtual weekly office hours. And I hope everyone's staying healthy, staying dry. We've now reached 648 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. 21 months ago, I converted my weekly office hours at the local coffee shop into a weekly live stream address, and I haven't missed a week since. I'm normally now following up that live stream session with an in-person meeting at Being Seen. I'm taking the week off this week, but I should be back next week if you want to join me. People still say they really enjoy hearing from their mayor each week. You know, these weekly sessions allow me to reflect on what's happened over the last few weeks as well as over the last year. And, you know, it allows me to provide you some news, some updates, answer some of your questions, and just pass on some general words of encouragement. So thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. So let's go ahead and just jump to what's been happening at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks or so. You know, last Monday, you know, the California Department of Public Health announced that face masks are again required for indoor settings, regardless of vaccination status, effective from December 15th through January 15th. And so they also recommended surgical masks and higher level N95 respirators. It didn't really affect, you know, our counties. It's mainly for some of the counties that had lifted those exemptions. And, you know, those broad exceptions apply to children under age 2, people with medical conditions that would be worsened with masks, and of course, hearing impaired or others that were wearing a mask would actually pose a risk to their work. But, you know, during the announcement, they basically said that they wouldn't they'd figure out what to do for certain counties that had already carved out limited exemptions. And, you know, then Tuesday of last week, they clarified that they would honor those counties that had carved out specific mask exemptions for those that in indoor settings, depending upon what those levels were. So San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa counties had special exemptions. Last Tuesday, our city council had our final meeting of the year. It was a long evening. We started with a study session where we discussed possible revisions to our short-term rental laws. And this includes, you know, and we basically, council was pretty much unanimous in imposing large fines for health and safety issues, requiring permit numbers on all the short-term rental ads. You know, so that's one of the things that we've been dealing with, a lot of the short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, and, you know, they are in favor of, you know, publicizing that to all the short-term rental landlords from our city standpoint. So that was, you know, all this is in regards to the shooting that happened at one of the Airbnb locations within the city that someone had rented out the house and then had a big party. And so, and then of course there was a shooting at that party, and luckily it looks like they have conceivably tracked down who the shooter was. So there was an arrest, and someone's under custody as the investigation continues just last week. As for the main meeting, you know, we officially declared, you know, Mason Fong's council seat open. So he was at large seat number 3. And so when we declare that as vacant, it starts the process. And that was establishing that final process of schedules for making the appointment to city council, which will, you know, should be happening on February 8th. And then we finalize what the application looks like, and that's online now. And then the interview schedule, which is January 31st and February 2nd. So that's coming up as far as appointing someone to fill that position for the rest of the year. And luckily, you know, we were able to kind of thread that needle of maximizing the date that we 30 days to declare that seat vacant, and then 60 days, up to 60 days to do the appointment. And that falls after the February 2nd deadline for the June primary. So we don't have to run an at-large election in June, which would cost the city about $250,000. So we're good from that standpoint. We received the fiscal year 2020-2021 year-end report. And luckily we had about 9 million more estimated revenue and about 6 million less in expenditures. So after we backfill some of our reserves and some of our other items, we have about a $12 million balance for reappropriation. And so that remaining balance will be brought forward for consideration in our January meeting at the end of January. So that's when the comprehensive financial report is done. But that's actually pretty positive that we'll be able to do multiple things. We do this on a yearly basis that you hopefully that you're not in a negative budget at the end of the year. Hopefully you're in the positive and then figuring out what to do with those additional funds. We accepted a donation from Google for improvements for our complete street signing and striping improvements in Moffett Park. And so that's much like we did the previous week. LinkedIn had done a certain amount of donations for improvements along Maud and the Maud Mary intersection for bike and pedestrian improvements, and Google gave back it's about $750,000 for improvements in Moffett Park. So, it's always good to see how they're making those areas, more bikeable, more walkable. It's good for our residents as well as the employees that are working at in those areas. And as everyone knows, we're currently redoing Moffett Park specific plan. And so we're updating that to add conceivably more office, more retail, so about 10 million more square feet of office, but 500,000 square feet of retail and up to 20,000 new units of housing. So making that area, much more walkable, eco-friendly, and especially active transportation friendly, makes that whole transportation in, through, around Moffett Park that much better. So council also approved the final design for the 6.5 acre Redwood Park at the old AMD campus. So, that was zoned industrial to residential about 30 years ago. And ultimately, when AMD moved out, a developer came in. We negotiated with that developer for improved density in regards to, okay, you can have improved density if you add a park. And I think that was the big thing, is adding a 6.5 acre park next to the San Miguel neighborhood, which is pretty much underserved, is an underserved community as far as parks are concerned. And so this adds a multi-use field, a playground area, picnic areas, large and small dog parks. So, and the other positive thing is the developer, after did a lot of research, but also as they started doing development on the site, they ended up relocating 8 large sequoia trees. So, and they saved, a very large number of ash and sequoias that are already on the site, but they ended up relocating some that would have had to be torn down or cut down because when they were doing construction, so that park will have a lot of very large species and trees already on the site, and when the park opens. And the positive thing is, that set the timeline as far as our approval that park should be opening in June of next year. So not that long, and we'll have a brand new, very large park in our city. So all that's really positive. Last Thursday, President Biden signed the debt ceiling increase. So this ensured that the U.S. will not default on its debt. And so the legislation raised the debt ceiling to $2.5 trillion and was sent to Biden on Wednesday. This should at least allow us to cover the obligations until the beginning of 2023. And so that'll be after the midterms. And so that'll be positive also. Last Thursday, Santa Clara County Health Officer Dr. Cody said that she expects a deluge of Omicron cases in the county as COVID-19 variant spreads around the United States, around the Bay Area. Residents are traveling and gathering for the holidays. So, even though the number of cases in Santa Clara County remains low, it was 10 as of last Thursday, and I think it's grown to about 50 or 60 last I saw. The county announced that a single Omicron case. The week before it went up to 10. Now I think it's 50 or 60. But you know, we still, the county remains one of the best vaccinated counties in the nation. And, you know, of course, evidence and a certain amount of study, I think, that came out of the UK is that, you know, the Omicron variant is more transmissible, but it looks like it is less virulent. It's less worry. It's more like catching the cold. You know, I've known several people already who have gotten it, and it's not good to have COVID, of course, but at least this variant seems to be less deadly. And then as far as this week has been relatively slow. You know, no council meeting this week. And on Monday, you know, California's Independent Redistricting Commission voted unanimously to approve the final maps for several districts. And, you know, the commission was really under a lot of pressure to meet their deadline of December 27th, even though the census data had been delayed about 6 months. They finally were able to, and they've done a lot of outreach. And, you know, in the last few weeks, the panel held multiple marathon sessions late into the evening to hear public comment and try to incorporate, you know, competing testimony into its maps. You know, these district maps will be taking effect by the June 2022 primaries. And so that was, and they'll continue through, of course, through the next 10 years. But this was one of the things why, you know, was getting it done was important and had to be done by the 27th. It's the second time that California is redrawing its districts with a 14-member independent commission. And I spent, you know, a lot of time over the last few months, first trying to keep track of all the different redistricting commissions, and then giving public testimony where I can. And, you know, this is from a Sunnyvale standpoint, you know, one of the big things is it looks like we're remaining in the Congressional District 17. So that's Ro Khanna's district. As for Senate districts, it looks like we'll be moving from Senator Becker's district to Senate District 10, which is Dave Cortez's district, who used to represent us as county supervisor. And then as far as the state assembly district, it looks like there'll be a brand new state assembly district 26 with no incumbents currently there. Although, you know, the redistricting put Mark Berman and Evan Lowe into the same district. So we'll see if either of them will move out to this new district. So lots of things happening at the state and federal level around, you know, around the state, you know, as those district lines are redefined. So ultimately, a lot of things as far as that's concerned. You know, as far as Sunnyvale's redistricting, we have a March deadline with the county registrar for the November election. So it's not the same since we don't have June primaries, it's a little bit easier for us. But on January 13th, there will be a joint meeting between the Sunnyvale City Council and the Redistricting Commission to review the map submission. And then ultimately, the commission will choose 3 to 5 maps for Sunnyvale Council to decide upon. So most likely on the recommended, they should be choosing a recommended map, but we'll see how that process is going. If you're interested in contributing still to the Sunnyvale redistricting, all you need to do is go to sunnyvale.ca.gov/redistricting, and you can find out all the information there about upcoming meetings and what the next decision points are as far as that's concerned. And then on Wednesday, you know, Governor Newsom was at a vaccination clinic, and he spoke about new coronavirus vaccination booster requirements in California, and expanded testing for students. So because the rise of the Omicron variant in the state, you know, Omicron is now the dominant version of the coronavirus in the country, which is, you know, it's being spread to more people, but because it's not as deadly, it looks like, you know, less people are going into the hospital because of it. But California, so the governor announced that California will provide 1 to 2 rapid COVID tests for each K through 12 public school student returning from winter break. And then Newsom also said that the state ordered 6 million tests to be provided to healthcare workers to give to their students for free. And then as far as healthcare workers in the state, they will now be required to receive a booster shot of COVID vaccine by February 1st, 2022. So they have, just over a month to do that. And this will, Newsom said that this decision will help prevent staffing shortages. And hopefully that's true. It's like, definitely I've heard of issues with people of different healthcare providers having enough nurses, enough doctors to show up. So hopefully that will help out. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. We'll just zip on through today. The Omicron variant, of course, is spreading rapidly around the U.S., around the world. And from a national standpoint, we've now had 51.5 million cases. That increased 1.2 million just in the last week. That's up from 900,000 week to week, a week ago. So we've had, over a million new cases just in the last week. Nationally, we've had 241 million vaccinated with at least 1 dose. That's almost 85% of adults, and almost 72% of adults are fully vaccinated. And then as far as deaths, the U.S. passed 809,000 deaths with people with COVID, over 9,000 just in the last week. And then for California, we've had 4.9 million positive cases. We're now about 5,700 cases a day. That's up from 5,500 a week ago a day. And it was just a few weeks ago, it was in the 4,000s or 3,000. So, definitely we've seen a large number of new cases around the state. We've had about over 75,000 fatalities at this point. That's up about 500 deaths just in the last week. And then on a positive note, we've had over 63 million vaccines administered, just about 1.5 million in the last week. And that's mainly from booster shots and, some of the children getting vaccinated. We're still at number 11 with states with at least 1 shot at 79%. And 15th with states with residents with fully vaccinated at 70.5%. And from a county, the county continues to do a great job, getting people tested, getting people vaccinated. Yesterday, the county reported that our cumulative positive test case rate has now reached 157,000. And that's up about 2,000 just in the last week. And then we've had 1,930 deaths, another 6 deaths in the last week related to COVID. But 92% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated, and over 50% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received their booster shot. So that's, that's fantastic. People are getting their booster. I continue to do a lot of advocating on our city's behalf, at the county level, discussions with our county supervisors and county health. As far as testing, and a lot of people want to get tested. The county health pop-up van will be at the community center on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of the month. So they'll be back here on June 6th, and you can get your appointment. And it's all by appointment from 9:30 to 4 p.m. and you can get that a week before. So on December 30th, you should be able to sign up for getting that appointment. And once those appointments are filled, there are other locations where you can get tested around the county, but you just need to go to sccfreetest.org and sign up to get your appointment here in Sunnyvale at the community center or elsewhere around the county. And then as far as getting vaccinated, the county has lots of lots of locations around the county to get your vaccine. And they've been really urging people that everyone should get their booster shot right away, especially as you're going into the holiday season and conceivably seeing some friends that you haven't seen before. But the county has, drop-in vaccination clinics, and just to go find out where you can get vaccinated, where you can get your booster, go to sccfreevax.org, and you can get your booster there. I wanted to announce some upcoming events. First, of course, I just want to remind people that the farmers market downtown Sunnyvale will be closed tomorrow, and actually for both the next 2 weekends on Saturday. So they'll be closed for Christmas tomorrow, and it'll be closed for New Year's on December 1st. But the Sunnyvale ice rink is open for those of you that want to learn to skate or love to skate. They'll be open until Sunday, January 2nd. So you still have about a week and a half to go do some skating. I know today might not be the best day for it, but definitely sometime over the next week when there's clearing, you should be able to find a time to go skate. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, we take another week off next week, but on January 4th, we have our first meeting of the year, and that will start out with a study session on the El Camino Real plan specific update. And so this has been a long time coming. We've had to make some changes because of some state law, so making it easier for developers to not deal with some of the local zoning, especially some of the retail components that we're hoping to add in the mixed use areas along El Camino. We don't want to lose that retail component up and down El Camino Real, and we just don't want it to become all housing. So that's what we'll start that, get an update from staff on what's happening as far as the El Camino Real specific plan. And then we'll have the ceremonial recognition for Councilmember Fong's departure from council. And then our big thing will be adopting an urgency ordinance and introduce an ordinance amending several portions of our Sunnyvale Municipal Code, mainly regarding to subdivisions and zoning, streets and sidewalks, related mainly to state legislation, Senate Bill 9 on housing developments in single-family zone districts. So that SB 9 goes into effect in 2022, and we want to make sure our local codes reflect some of the laws and how to best zone and how to best subdivide conceivably some single family lots. And then council will do some things that we do at the beginning of every year. We'll select a new vice mayor, which we do every year. We'll choose our intergovernmental responsibilities, and we'll choose our seat locations around on the dais. And at some point next year, we'll be back in person. Yeah, my guess is it won't be until, we'll be doing a strategic session at the end of January in person, but that'll be at the senior center, the community center. But at some point, we'll be having in-person meetings, and those will be hybrid meetings coming in 2022. And I'm looking forward to sitting back on the dais, but we choose our dais seatings for the coming year. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. So if you have a question, just add it to the chat and I'll try to get to it. Brianna asked, do you know about local restaurants that will be open on Christmas Day? I know I would find it very useful. Thanks for your time. I've been checking with several owners, and most are giving their staff the day off. I do know at least 2 places so far. Gurkha's Kitchen, which is Indian and Nepalese food on Marion Fremont, will be open in the afternoon. And then Halal Fried Chicken on Duane, good for chicken sandwich and fries. And actually, they also added fish sandwiches and fish and chips to their menu recently. So they'll also be open in the afternoon. And so if you know of any other restaurants that are open, please add them to the comments. But definitely, it'll be a lot of people eating from home for Christmas Day. Jeff asked, what is happening with the old Walgreens on El Camino? Great news, Ace Hardware took over the lease of that building. And so that used to be the old Walgreens right at Maria and El Camino Real, right near the Safeway. And so staff said that they are super excited, that AC Hardware is super excited to be coming here. And, they've been expanding into smaller hardware stores throughout the country. So I was recently in one in Redwood City a few weeks ago, and I think it's a good, they actually fill up that location very well. So I think that old Walgreens will be perfect for what they want to do. And they plan to be opening in late January, early February. So it won't be long before they'll be moved in there. There's not much reconstruction that they have to do from an interior standpoint. It's just basically putting in new shelving and restocking that. So looking forward to that early in 2022. I got several questions related to the new 6.5 acre park at the old AMD campus. Evelyn asked, where are the trees being located from? And so the coastal redwoods, and I think there's about 8 of them, are being relocated from other locations on the site. And so that was conceivably where buildings, there were apartments and some condos being developed on the rest of the 35 acre site. And so ultimately, as opposed to cutting down certain trees, it's being able to move them to that park area. So basically that park has all these old growth trees and should be looking fantastic. Carla asked, the one thing I think the parks in Sunnyvale really miss is a place to grab a coffee or a snack. It would be great to be able to come and enjoy the park with kids or dogs while having a nice coffee or tea. It would be also a great opportunity for a small business owner. So good news. The developers are talking about putting in a small store at the base of that apartment building right next to the park. So ultimately, this would be a place where you could grab a cup of coffee, a drink, and then go over to the park, a snack, and go over to the park and enjoy. So definitely, this is one of the best things about doing more of a planned site. We're looking at always, adding parks where we can, but in working with conjunction with those developers, you can get some amenities like that are a benefit for the people living at that multifamily residential, as well as the people utilizing that park. So it's good from that standpoint. David asked, what if we see flooding or down trees in Sunnyvale? What do we do? So you can always report Sunnyvale street flooding at 408-730-7400. And then for down trees, so if you see down Sunnyvale trees before 4 p.m., it's 408-730-7506. And then after 4 p.m., it's 408-730-7180. And of course, if you have flooding at your home, you can always get free sandbags at the Courtyard, and that's at 221 Commercial Street. So, hopefully everyone's staying dry. It's looking like a rainy week, but hopefully if you see any issues, definitely report them. Mary asked, last week I heard there was coyotes in Sunnyvale. Is that true? And yes, recently there have been several coyote sightings in Sunnyvale. Most recently was last week at Ponderosa Park, but many people have been calling dispatcher to report those sightings. Just as a reminder, this should be the non-emergency number, but do not call 911 to report coyote sightings. Coyotes are actually an important part of our ecology, and we need to live alongside them, of course. Attacks are extremely rare, but they can happen if the animal feels threatened. So just take the appropriate precautions to keep your family and your pets safe, and of course the coyote safe as much as possible. Olwen asked, I would love a protected bike lane on Evelyn. I tried biking to work through Evelyn, but the cars drive so quickly and the lanes keep disappearing. It was a little scary for me, and I haven't tried it again since. So the positive thing is the Evelyn Trail was fully funded from downtown Sunnyvale to the Mountain View border at Bernardo. And, I've been working with continuing that from Bernardo all the way to downtown Mountain View. And so it's just making sure that their Mountain View is already looking at adding some connection from their downtown Caltrain station to the Stevens Creek Trail. And so it just makes sense to continue that all the way into Sunnyvale. So I think, that buffered bike lane, and it'll be protected with a barrier, is kind of like an Evelyn Trail from downtown Sunnyvale to downtown Mountain View. And happy that we got funding from both Josh Becker, Senator Becker, in the last state budget, which we just accepted. And there's a portion of the infrastructure bill that has funds earmarked for that same thing. So with all that funding, we should be able to get that finally completed. Allison asked, any updates on the City Line development? So there's several things that were announced in the last few weeks. City National Bank, it'll be a new bank that'll be opening in January in City Line, right on McKinley Avenue. And then there are several announcements. Flashstick Pub, it's a miniature golf place. So it has local beers and golfing and conceivably foosball and some games, leased about 12,000 square feet across from Target along McKinley. And then Roadrunner Sports, so that's a shoe and apparel for runners. They rented 4,000 square feet in that same building along McKinley, along the south side of McKinley, or on the north side of McKinley. And ultimately that will be opening sometime in 2022. So lots of new retail coming to downtown Sunnyvale, which is always good. I think that's all of my questions. I don't see any other. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again for joining me this holiday week. Please stay healthy, try to stay dry when you're out. And of course, be careful, wear your mask, be careful who you're congregating with. Hopefully, it's going to be a lot of people, if they're meeting up with others because it's going to be a rainy week, they'll be mainly inside. So, but, I just want to say, as I look back over the last year, I'm really proud of our city over the last year and over the last 2 years in our response to COVID. This is a season of gratitude. So I'm thankful for our wonderful residents who are always looking for ways to help out others in our community. The future is still uncertain. New issues, new variants seem to come up every few weeks, but your actions really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're really in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a Merry Christmas, and please take care. Until next week, goodbye. Take care. Goodbye.